So on the 3rd of September, the British and the French issue an ultimatum to Germany to withdraw from Polish territory. Again, it's so interesting. Which Polish territory? Suppose that they have sent a telegram, you must withdraw from the Polish territory, and let's see, Danzig up to negotiation, international conference. No, they just simply said, Danzig is Polish, therefore you have to withdraw, therefore if you don't, we're going to go to war. The interesting thing is, if you say you're going to go to war, you kind of have to mean it, but they didn't. That's the incredible fact about 1939. They declared the war, and then nothing happened. Nothing happened. This period in history is known as phony war, or fake war, or no war. Essentially, there was no military action at all until spring of next year, of 1940. And even then, there was action in Norway and in Denmark when Hitler... but there was no military action with the British and the French until June 1940. So that basically means, if you didn't mean to fight, why did you declare war? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. They declared war, but they didn't mean to and did not fight at all, which of course shows that there was apathy, that there was reluctance to go to war, that the public opinion was not ready to go to war again. And again, if you are the government of your people and you realize your people don't want to fight, why do you declare war? It just absolutely makes no sense. It's totally irresponsible to declare war without actually going to war. Then just negotiate. I mean, cut a deal. I mean, do something. But they didn't. They just declared war, didn't do anything. So, now, the thing is that there was an expectation everywhere that there's going to be fighting. I mean, the war is declared, and then there's none. That really makes Stalin very nervous, because he kind of confirms in Stalin's mind that the West really wanted to unleash Hitler against Russia. And it was a very clever move that he prevented it by striking a deal with Hitler at the last moment, so that if there is a war, it should be on the Western Front. So that leads Stalin to pursue his own agenda, and in December 1939, he goes to war against Finland. He thought it was going to be an easy victory, but it was not, and it is a very, very important war. And I'll explain why. It's extremely important small war. So, the Russian-Finnish war is in the north. It's on the border between Finland and the Soviet Union. What many people don't understand is that the old border between Finland, when Finland separated from Russian Empire, it was a part of Russian Empire before 1918, the border was like 20 kilometers from St. Petersburg, very, very close. In fact, when I grew up, my grandfather had a country house, a dacha, and it was already in the territory that used to be Finland, a township called Terioki, which is about 30 minutes by electric train outside of St. Petersburg, Leningrad. So it's very close. So basically what Stalin said, the war aim was program minimum and program maximum. Program minimum was to move the border to the west, so that it's not as close to Leningrad as it was after the separation of Finland. And program maximum, if things went well, why not take all of Finland and establish Soviet Republic there and annex it to the Soviet Union? So in a sense, the Finns were demonstrated by their capacity to resist the Red Army, that they defended truly their independence and saved Finland from Soviet aggression. How did they manage to do it? Very, very interesting. If in World War I, nobody could think of new ways of fighting the war, and this is the stupidity of World War I. You know, they would have a trench, and they would shoot at each other, and then poison gas each other. The Finns were very innovative in their military tactics. And so basically what they did, there were two things that they did new. Number one, they did not try to hold the line. They would allow the Soviet columns to go through, and you cannot go, it's a very thick pine forest, so there's only a few roads that the tanks and trucks could go through. The trucks cannot go through a pine forest. There's just no way you could maneuver between the trees. So the only way you could move forward is in areas that are cleared of the trees, which means roads. So the Soviets would have a column of tanks and trucks and things that would move along the road. The Finns would let them go, but then they're going to sit on the trees and shoot down in their back and then disappear. So this is the typical scene of a Finnish war. You have like Soviet columns, move silently forward. Then out of nowhere, the Finns appear, throw grenades and bombs and machine guns, and then kill as many as they can and just vanish. Another thing that they did was extremely innovative. It was winter. They would put white robes, like from sheets and stuff, white, and they would be on skis. And on top of it, they would have machine guns, like automatic rifles, which are first already. They were just beginning to appear, and they were not very good, but they were much better than Russian rifles of World War I vintage, which is huge rifle, and it shoots one at a time, which is of course ridiculous. So the Finns were maneuverable, they were on skis, they were invisible, they were white, they just appear, shoot, and disappear. It was absolutely catastrophic casualties of the Red Army. They were secret for a long, long time, but it was absolutely astounding casualties in hundreds of thousands that were basically just shot out of the roads by the Finnish resistance. So finally, the Finns won in the sense of in terms of Clausewitz, who defined that you can win by making the continuation of the war too expensive. And that's what happened. The continuation of the war was too expensive in lives and ammunition that Stalin decided to make a deal. And the deal was a program minimum, which is the border will be moved, but Finland remains independent. And that is pretty much the way it is today. Essentially, the border was moved 250 kilometers to the west. It was no longer as close to St. Petersburg, which means it would be much more secure for the big... And that was the end of the Finnish campaign. Now, I said to you, this is a very important war. Why is that? The reason is that Hitler and the German General Staff were watching. And what do you think their conclusion was? Their conclusion was, if Finns can beat the Russians, then we can do it 100 times over. So that's the conclusion. This is why it's such an important war. Without this war, it's not clear whether Hitler would have had the guts and the power to convince his generals to go against the Soviet Union. But because they won in World War I over Russia, and because the Finns pretty much won against the entire Red Army of the entire Soviet Union, Hitler came to a conclusion, we can beat the Russians. And that is when they begin to prepare for war with the Soviet Union, which would come in 1941. And finally, let's return to the West. And that is called the darkest hour of France, the 15th of June, 1940. This is indeed perhaps the day of humiliation. This is the most difficult and the most painful page in French history, when you have a German Blitzkrieg. Essentially, you have a Schlieffen plan that was finally executed just right. The Germans cut through the French lines through Belgium. This time they didn't get stuck. This time, and this is the innovation of World War II, nobody walks. Every single soldier is motorized. Nobody walks, no horses. Everybody is riding a truck, a tank, or in the small villages, a bicycle or a car. So it's a highly mobile army. It moves, and the great innovation is the tank army. You have concentration of tanks. They just go through the front line. They encircle the French army. They encircle the British army, and in a matter of 1 week, it's over. The French army is surrounded and defeated, and the Germans are marching into Paris. So this is absolutely astounding success. Nobody would believe that the Germans could do it. They did it, and the forgotten episode is that the Germans surrounded the British army as well, and the British are stuck in Dunkirk, which is a port, and something amazing happened. The official story: the British army evacuated back to Britain. What is not a lot of times emphasized is that Hitler ordered the German army to stop. He could have annihilated the entire British army of 300,000 men. He could have taken them all prisoners of war. But he didn't. He gave an order, stop, and let them go. That's a very, very interesting episode. And it kind of implies that Hitler hoped to not humiliate the British and cut a deal with them. The French are defeated, a deal with the British, and that's it. It's done. He basically reversed the results of World War I in this one Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Whatever may be the reasons, the British don't emphasize this. They basically say they heroically evacuated and saved 200,000 British troops from surrender and defeat. But it was a clear superior operation of the German army on the Western Front that is still not forgotten in France. Now, the result was that is 4 years of humiliation of the French, and France is divided into two zones. One is the occupied, the other is unoccupied. In the unoccupied, you have Vichy government in the city of Vichy. And the most touching that I find in the whole story is the speech of General de Gaulle, who spoke to the French people from London. It kind of, all of us who love France, make your tears go by when you listen to General de Gaulle appealing to the French people to resist and to fight and to join him in continuing to fight for free France. So he called his movement Fighting France, and there were quite a few people who did try to join de Gaulle in his effort. So that pretty much stops this first phase of very successful operation. But as we can see, this is just the beginning. In 1941, the Germans are going to attack the Soviet Union, and there'll be a mighty big war still lay ahead. That's it.